meet the teams behind the user group. So like I'm senior engineer in Kenya, senior platform engineer, Microsoft Azure MVP. On this user group with Kevin Green that works in Dublin. Just gonna do some code of conduct. So before we get started, just be friendly, be polite, and try to understand each other and ask questions. So this is the agenda for today. So the first session is going to be on Callum Whyte. He's going to do it on AI and various. And then around 7 o'clock, there's going to be some pizza coming soon. So take your time. And then followed by Gunley is doing a session on KQL 101. So we talk about various operators. And Jonathan is doing AVM and Bicep. So Azure Verified Module is one that came out recently. And then we're going to wrap it up with a quiz, and we'll be finished roughly 8:40. Yeah, so in the next event is going to be on the 19th. So it's going to be online, but it's going to, Jasmine Taylor is going to introduction to security, and Tiago Costa is doing securing cloud best practice from the field. And the in-person, there's going to be another in-person event, and I'm hoping in October, celebrate my anniversary of this user group in Dublin with Kevin. So that's it. That's that bit, and I'll hand it over to Callum to start the first one.
Hey everybody. Share my screen. Fantastic. Hey everybody. So as mentioned, I'm going to be doing Azure AI. Not quite a lot. Just some of my favorite bit. So this is me, Callum. I'm Microsoft MVP, just renewed now for the 5th year. I work with an open source .NET based CMS called Umbraco as well. Fantastic if you want CMS. I run a company that's based around Umbraco and hence I am the chief Bumpster. Software developer by speak at lots of events, organize my own social network that handle things. All right, so kind of era of AI. I'm by no means expert in AI. I've not got a background in it, but certainly something that's become more and more accessible recent years with the advent of things. ChatGPT, it's sort of become very mainstream. Politicians in part just research projects, but for a long while now for developers, it's one API away, API call away for us. We don't have to really understand AI or systems, but access them. A couple of API. So pretty powerful. And with that unlocks potential that I'm a bit biased, of course, but I think Microsoft is one of the exciting players in the space where with the efforts they're making in AI and some of the tools they've got. So this is a quick overview of all of the sort of Microsoft AI landscape, at least Azure perspective. There's actually many more of these because M365 and all the other tools as well, and CoPilots for absolutely everything now. But effectively, we've got the Azure AI services umbrella, which is like bot service and cognitive services, which have been around a long time. In fact, maybe 17 or 18. I've seeing people doing demos of like tagging images. These are tried and tested bits of video indexes, something people may not have seen, but it's a way inferring from video content. metrics, document intelligence, decision making, language, speech, vision, and a whole host of things, as well as the Azure ML layers too. So you can go all the way from like fully managed AI solutions down to like there's so much to cover here, and it would today, I think, to talk. I was just going to pick out a couple of these services that I find really interesting, things that maybe you didn't know, and that might inspire you to go and use services. Specifically, this is speech the speech services and the Azure OpenAI service. So before we dive into that, a little bit about the concept of studios. This is Microsoft's favorite thing in the AI space. Everything, all of their products has a studio, hasn't it? So they have a speech studio, a language studio, a vision studio, ML studio, Open AI studio as well. These are effectively dedicated tools, websites you can go to where you can fully manage and interact with their various for that niche. So we're going to have a look at speech second. They've also got this concept of an Azure AI studio. Just one overarching tool is lovely, and the interface is great, but it only lets you do about half the things that all the other ones do. I think the idea is eventually they together, but for now, sort of point of documentation, and it's all a bit disjointed. There is also an Azure AI studio, which is to be the home AI services Azure. One of the cool things that this does, maybe perhaps unlike Microsoft that used to, they are exposing much every mainstream model to end users straight through this AI studio. So you can go here and you can spin up a Meta Llama model, any of the OpenAI models. You can also research models. So they are not just fixed to one provider or one type of model. You can go there and try a whole very quickly. Dive over here. Yes, we can. Fantastic. So this is what the Azure AI Studio looks like. And you can see down the side here, we've got access to various categories of products, but one of them is this model catalog. I believe this is really exciting. You can, with a couple of clicks, deploy one of these models straight into Azure. Things like Whisper, which is OpenAI's speech inference model, all the way down to all of the different Llama models, Mistral. So, a couple of clicks and away you go. The AI Studio gives you all the tools. Started working with them, including code samples, various SDKs, Python, C, Java, etc. Which is really cool. And this, which I've seen these, floating around the internet a bit, but they have their own benchmarks. How these models cloud, and you can get quite granular with that. So when you're looking for a model for a certain task, you can go here and you can look at what's maybe the best fit for your case. So you can choose from this, fairly limited, I think, but choose from this the kind of task it is, and it will give you scores and ratings based on all down. You can say, we have bias. We don't want to use them. And you can fill out, and you can get answers that you actually need, which is really powerful. So we've got a comparison down here that will sort of give you scores on all the accuracy. Social media really likes at the moment to complain about OpenAI, I think, saying it's not accurate anymore and I'm going to use Claude or something instead, and that's fine. But this, at least for the models that are available on Azure's OpenAI, or Azure's AI services, gives you a good breakdown of how accurate they are, etc. So GPT-4 Turbo is certainly the most accurate model. Anyway, yeah, I thought this was really cool. It's a nice way of you deciding which model you want. A couple of clicks straight into Azure. We should also talk about the Azure OpenAI service. So, of course, OpenAI is a separate standalone company that Microsoft have given considerable backing to, but they don't control any of the underlying technology. It is, however, deployed on Azure natively, soon to be out as well. Mostly it's on Azure, and so Azure is possibly the best place that you could consume one of those models. Network latency, etc. They are available to you locally in every Azure data center. And on top of that, Microsoft has then taken those models. They've now got experience of running for OpenAI and have deployed those public cloud, consumption by end users. So within a couple of clicks, you can access nearly all of the the mainstream OpenAI via an Azure service. So your billing is all done through. This includes ChatGPT 3, 3.5 Turbo, 4 Turbo, DALI as well. Don't quite have Sora or any of the niche models just yet, but at least all the mainstream ones are there. So what this means is you can deploy Azure OpenAI service, and you can your own DALI generation, for example. Use that for your own workloads. One of the crucial things, and this will become is have to request access to this service. They don't just grant it to anybody. And the reason for this is Microsoft has very strong groundings in responsible AI, making sure that the models that they give you access to, you're doing sensible things with it, doing anything. So you have to fill in a form where you have to explain exactly what you do with these services to actually request access. It gets granted within normally, my experience is a few hours. They say 24, but up to 10 days. So plan for that when you're working with one of these services. But effectively, it spins up the same model, the exact same model with the exact same weights and training that ChatGPT is, or even that Bing CoPilot is. They obviously put their own flavors and ratings on the top, but under the hood, it is the. So we pop over here to the Azure AI Studio, and it is a case of homepage. We can create a new project. There, we define the project name, and we choose a hub. Hub is effectively. So yeah, you have a deployed amount of resources to use those Azure AI. So resource that is in the open service, and I can go into here and I can hear like being. So if I wanted to create a chatbot, you could do exactly that. They have this concept of playgrounds. Playgrounds is just an overarching name for the different purposes you might wish to use Azure's OpenAI service force. Chat thing is to recreate something like ChatGPT. Images is something like DALI, etc. The way that the AI industry is trending is towards this concept of agents. The idea that you can create a tool that may be more of an orchestrator and sends tasks to dedicated applications, say certain LLMs or certain code, business logic that will be responsible for doing a very task. So if you think about an agent as an overarching task, I need to book a flight and hotels my upcoming business trip sometime in September. So you'd have a scheduling agent. That agent's job is responsible for finding all of the gaps in your calendar and maybe the people you need to meet with calendar to find exactly when the. Then you might have a flights agent. The flights agent's responsible for going and finding the appropriate flights. You might have a financial controlling agent that goes in there and says, we don't want to spend £10,000 on a flight to Manchester, so we're not going to do that. And then you have a hotel thing that might look at your preferences and based on distance to your meeting and all this stuff, work out these things. Rather than relying on one AI, one tool that does everything, you delegate those tasks to individual dedicated agents. And this is something that the Azure OpenAI service is really starting to gear up towards, especially with products and integrations such as Semantic Kernel. So has anyone, by a show of hands, heard of Semantic? So in brief, Semantic Kernel is a library in predominantly C#, but they've got Java implementations now as well, and Python implementations too. It gives you a friendly wrapper in code where you can call off to a variety of backing AI services, let's say OpenAI or Azure OpenAI, and it will understand how to call functions in your code through natural language. So you can say, when you call, when I give you this prompt, when I give you this instruction, this is the piece of actually X. This really allows you quite quickly and easily to build up your own concept of agent. You have specific code that executes when it's asked a certain thing. You're not having to write any of the logic. Say, when X code fires over Y, you just give it a natural language. So I have a quick example actually to show you of that. This is C# code. I hope that's okay. Can people hear it? Do you want me to zoom in a little bit? Okay. Cool. So this is some very hopefully basic C# code, but I'll run through quickly what. First and foremost, installed the Semantic Kernel packages, Microsoft Semantic Kernel, and we've installed the Open AI provider for some. What this allows us to do is connect to either Azure OpenAI service or OpenAI's regular APIs, and it will use those in order to talk to build up our Semantic Kernel. Register a couple of things, and then we have this plugin. Plugin is effectively a set of tasks, language prompts to say when a bit of code be executed. You don't need to worry. Just me writing some code to actually look down here. I've created this Lights plugin. I say I've created this from the docs. I'm sorry. But effectively, this plugin's job is to turn on or off the light, and on or off the lights that I've specifically asked. So there's two methods in this plugin. The first one is to get a list of all of the different lights and their current state. And what you do is you write your code just like you would write any other piece of function called get lights async, and it returns a lights object, which at the top here we've got a table lamp, a porch light, and a chandelier, and the chandelier is on, the other ones are off. The calling gets lights async just returns that list, and that list is going to say that the chandelier is on and the other ones are off. Nothing special. But what has been added to this function, this method, is this attribute, a description. This description says that the function gets a list of lights at their current state. And when you run your code, Semantic Kernel will tell that to the model and say, this is the function that you need to call when someone wants the lights. Then you can, in natural language, talk to that model and say, can you tell me, is the chandelier on? And it will call background, and it will work that out. It will infer that for you. So you've not had to write a single bit of code that you would regularly, other than a small prompt there. And then if you want it to do sort of actions and other things, do exactly that. So we give it a description here. We've got our change state async method. It takes in an ID and a Boolean to say if it's on or off. It goes and it finds the light, and it sets the value to be. So here, mutating state. What this is effectively then going to do is, based on the prompt, it will up in the model. So this is a really nice, quick, simple example of how you might build your own agent. Something like I think I demo. Hope I show you. No, let me skip over that one. I've got some cooler demos I want to show you. But yeah, Azure OpenAI service gives you a couple of tools that, within theory, a few lines of code, you can start building your own intelligent. Okay, so we've quickly dived into Azure OpenAI service there. I mentioned there's a few others that are interesting. Bot service and cognitive search have been around a long time. Azure cognitive search, I think, has been up a bit recently, but effectively this works now nicely with all of the different storage tools you've been used to, Cosmos, DB, etc. A lot of the other ones are sort of APIs that you can throw data at and get a response back. Speech is one that I've had a little play with and I find really interesting and fun. So I wanted to spend a bit of time. So the question here is, can I clone my voice? That would be cool, right? I attend so many meetings in my job. Wouldn't it be fun? Send an AI in my place? Well, yeah, maybe. I think we've all wished at some point in the past we could have cloned it. Well, during the pandemic, I actually saw this video. Does anyone just recognize it from the phone? Went semi-viral. This guy is called Jesse Orrell. He was a video editor at CNET, and what he did is he recorded kind of canned responses, typical sort of Monday morning stand-up update where you go, yeah, no updates from me. Yep, all sounds good. Nodding, sipping cup of tea, etc. A whole host of them, over 50 of them, and he augmented his presence in their entire set of meetings for a whole week, which I thought was hilarious. Then at the end, he reveals, actually, you've not seen me at all week. I've just been sitting here in my pajamas, and you've just been watching pre-recorded copies of me. And actually, this thing I'm saying right now is also pre-recorded. It's just kind of funny. But it did get me thinking. Around the same sort of time, I saw a great demo from Donovan Brown of former Microsoft. He's Microsoft hired, about Azure Custom Neural, which is a product that they offer in their cloud service to allow you to train a synthetic version of your voice. And he did the exact same trick. Played a video demo that showed, hey, here's how you set up Azure Custom Neural Voice, and at the end goes, and by the way, the voice you've been listening to has been generated by. I didn't notice. Of course, when you look back on it afterwards, you go, yeah, okay, there's a few telltales, but on glance, it was very, very good. And that really inspired me. So I've had a little play and had some fun with this. And I hope you maybe are inspired to go and do the same. So what is Azure Custom Neural Voice? It is speech synthesis as a service. It's in Azure's speech umbrella of AI tools. You train your model, and they have 2 tiers of plan available, Lite and Pro. There is a distinct difference between these, and unlike you might be thinking, it's not the price. They are priced exactly the same. So firstly, how does Azure Neural Voice work? Firstly, you give it some text. That text runs through an analyzer. That analyzer picks out certain characteristics of that text, certain linguistic characteristics. Say things like properties of these words, is there emphasis on certain aspects of a word? Is there elongated sound? Is this a short, sharp sound? And bear in mind, that differs depending on accent and a whole host of things. It then goes through a neural acoustic model, and that's responsible for generating effectively sound waves or energy to make certain sounds. It goes through a neural vocoder, a cloud-based version effectively of, and then it gives us out audio on the other side. What this is actually doing under the hood is sort of calling a model that we've pre-trained. That model is based off of over 3,000, I think it says a lot more now, 3,000 hours of multilingual, multi-speaker speech across many languages. It says 50 here. I think it's more like 120 languages. They've taken pre-recordings of people speaking and trained models, categorized based on a whole a native English speaker, etc. They then run that through a transformer teacher model to train, and then they end up with effectively a multilingual model side. They fine-tune it for specific use cases. So if someone is male or female, or if someone is US English versus UK English, etc. And then finally, we give it our own training data. So if we want to create a model that sounds like us, we're not starting from scratch. We don't have to have those 3,000 hours. We are just tweaking the model that already exists, sound like us. Take the properties of our speech and make it sound like we sound. Accents and all. It trains that. It fine-tunes it and compresses it using an algorithm called fast speech, which was developed by the team at Microsoft and Google, actually. And then we have a model to deploy Azure. So I mentioned responsible use, really important for Microsoft. The Lite tier is restricted in terms of what you can do with it. So it has a very small set of use cases you can actually apply it to. Whereas the Pro tier, you have to apply and you have to say exactly what you're going to do with that voice. What it means is I can't just scrape someone's voice off the internet and make a clone of them and deploy it on Microsoft's technology. They require things like a talent statement. So the person who's given their voice actually has to give a spoken statement to say they consent to their voice being used, and that has to be refreshed, I think, every 90 days as well. So what we don't want to see is a website in a few years' time, has my voice been pwned, being spun up by Troy Hunt, and people have stolen people's voices off the internet and used it. And in fact, Troy did do a talk at NDC recently where he showed exactly this. Look, here's an open source library, and I've been able to create a clone with relativity. So, it is a real problem that Microsoft are at least doing their bit to make sure on their technologies we're doing the right thing. There are open source options that can. Fantastic. So let's actually look at training one of these models because it's a bit of fun. So a light model gives you moderate quality output because its expectation for the amount of data you give it is low. You're expected to give it around 30 to 50 utterances being phrases, sentences. You record those yourself, and you can record those directly in the browser inside Microsoft's Speech Studio. Then it goes away, crunches over that data that you've given it, and it trains its model. That takes about 1.5 hours, but then you're ready to go, and you can get to using this straight away in custom text-to-speech scenarios, etc., directly in Azure. Whereas Training Pro requires slightly higher quality and more natural sounding output. Think of something like a professional recording studio, a professional voice artist. And you might use this for use cases like professional telephone system or something. Press 1 for this. But yeah, and you need there about 300 to 2,000 utterances. So a hell of a lot more data. You can provide your own script, whereas Light gives you a mandated set of phrases you have to say. But also Microsoft have provided you some excellent sample scripts that really just get across all of the different linguistic characteristics that the model needs to learn. You can train up to 15 different styles of voice, such as anger, speak, whispering, and like shouting and all this sort of thing, which you can't do on the Light model. You can also upload your MP3 plus a transcript, but you don't have to. You can let Microsoft go and understand what you're saying, so you can just upload raw MP3s. You can even upload MP3s with multiple speakers in it and let Microsoft work out that there's 2 people there. Although I tried this with my Polish friend and we both ended up sounding like each other, so that was fun. On the whole, professional recordings. You can use conference talks, calls, call recordings, podcasts, etc. The actual training data takes a minimum of 24 hours. And I burned through a lot of Azure credits to train a model. So I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to play. The Light models are there and are ready to go and ready to train kind of as soon as you want. So let's talk about actually training a model and what's involved here, because I'm going to show you in a second. The first thing is, the first tip, which Microsoft gives you all of these, by the way, is to use a good quality microphone. So make sure you're standing an equal distance away from your microphone. Make sure you're not slightly or over projecting. Make sure you're not by a busy road, etc. Avoid background noise is key. You don't want some phrases with a dog barking, because it will, if you do that repeatedly enough, model will think that you saying the word "the" is with a dog barking, and it will just sound like that. Relax, speak naturally and slowly or clearly. Make sure you read and also express your emotions. I've got an example of this in a second that shows what happens when you don't. Right, scary. Record in 1 take. This is really important, because if you say split this over 2 or 3 days worth of recording, you've got very different energy levels. You've got very different sets of background noise, etc. If you want a good, clear, crisp result, you've got to do it in 1 take. But it's only 50 utterances. It takes about 30 minutes to review the quality metrics. We'll have a look at this one in a second. And the more data, the better. As with all AI systems, ML systems, more data you give it, the higher quality data you give it, the better your output will be. So you can do 20. Recommendation is to do 50. Fantastic. This is the fun bit. This is where I get to actually show you some. So I'll come over here into the Azure Speech Studio, and I'll zoom that a couple. So the Speech Studio lives on speech.microsoft.com. You can go into here and you can select a resource group I've created already. And in my case, firstly, it exposes all of the different services that are available inside Speech Studio. So things such as speech to text, as in speech recognition, things like custom speech, so building your own presentations, custom voice, or just choosing from a voice gallery. So you don't have to make your own voice. You could use one of their pre-built voices, which are very good and professionally record if you need to do something like that. Anyway, custom voice. So we dive into here, and I've created 2 examples of a natural sounding voice and a sounding voice. But for starters, I'll just show you how this works. So when I go into here and I'm asked, would you like to create a new project? You can select whether you want a light plan or a pro plan. I'm fortunate enough to have access to that, but today we're going to choose the light plan because it's much easier. And I click next. I have to give it a name, so just call this demo. have to choose a gender. Now, I know this is maybe controversial, but it's important because this is how the models have been classified. So ultimately, what this is choosing under the hood is what is the base training model we're going to be using. And so this is what you got to do. Believe that your voice sounds more male, choose male. If not. The same with the language. So whilst you can choose all of these different languages and dialects, choose the one that you feel best fits you and best fits your use case. You might find that if you're not, say, from the UK, that actually one of the other English dialects fits slightly better. Equally, my girlfriend is French, and we tried the French model on her voice, and she's a younger French person, and that was trained on sort of more business speak. Actually, it didn't work very well at all. And so you've really got to choose what fits your use case and fits your voice. In my case, I'm going to choose English UK male. Click create, and within a couple of seconds, it's created my project. So we can dive into here, and we can see exactly what's involved in training. Firstly, it's going to guide us through the steps. We record, we train, we test, and we can deploy our model. It gets started. Disclaimer, click that. Check to see how noisy the room is to make sure that I'm in an appropriately quiet place to record, so no one shout or anything. You can click done, you can ignore it. So whilst the tool is there to guide you, it's also quite forgiving. You can say, don't worry about the background noise. I accept the quality might average or but you can also listen back and hear this as you go. I'm just going to own voice on try and not speak. So firstly, you have to record a phrase. Like it gives you the phrases, and it's going to guide you through recording all of your samples. They're all slightly awkward sounding words, but I'll play out the guide text, so it always gives you a reference for how you should pronounce things.
Would you like a cup of tea?
There you go. So would you like a cup of tea is what we're going to have to do here. So it's going to ask me to speak to my computer and say that phrase, and we can get training our model. Would you like a cup of tea? Right. So you can see here it's actually guiding me for how good that recording was. It's clear. My pronunciation was near perfect, but I was too loud. So let's try that again. It's clearly drunk. We click next. As I say, it's quite forgiving. It will tell you that the quality was more or less good enough, and then we go through and we record. If I get something wrong when I record the phrase, let's show you what that might look like. Not really done what I hoped there, but it should pick up when you say words incorrectly or when you say words that are not intended to be there, and really helps guide you through the process. I'm not going to sit here and do all 50, but I'll show you quickly what this looks like when I've recorded my own sample. So you can see here I've just recorded through all 50 of them. If we look at the time, so I started at 5:15 p.m. and by 5:28 I'd recorded. So it literally took me 13 minutes to actually record 50 utterances. Here's an example of my recording. I'll just play this out.
It's hard to deny that tomatoes are the ideal summer food.
It's hard to deny. I agree. I love tomatoes. But it's hard to deny tomatoes are the ideal summer food. That is a phrase that it's asked me to say. That is the recording of me saying it. It's not crystal clear audio. In fact, I sat in my bedroom and I live beside a fairly busy road, and I just used the laptop microphone. I've not used any special equipment, but it's a fairly crystal clear record. It's quite good. I've done this for all of them, and I've sent it to training. The training took approximately 1 hour and when you go into this, you can now see, before I publish it, all of the different pre-allowed outputs service. So these are the pre-approved phrases, and this is what my neural voice actually sounds like on Azure.
Congratulations! You have successfully created your synthetic voice with Custom Neural Voice Lite.
It's pretty cool. Like it's it's not necessarily perfect. It sounds slightly robotic in places, but it is without doubt me, and it's my voice, and it would pass. And for 15 minutes worth of speaking, we've got that, which I think is pretty ace. I said I had trained a monotone version just for fun. Firstly, it took slightly longer to train. I think the model, because you're trying to compare against already known pre-trained phrases where someone has given certain emphasis, etc., and it's trying to match against that, it was maybe harder to match against the expected results, but it took me about 17 minutes to train instead of 13. And let's just listen to this tomatoes one again, just to compare difference in the training data I gave it.
It's hard to deny that tomato.
Don't need to listen to all of that. You get the idea. It's not good quality. I've not given any emphasis or personality to it. But if we go to the model and see the output that that's given us, we'll have a look at the same example again.
Congratulations. You have successfully created your synthetic voice with Custom Neural Voice Lite.
So it has copied exactly what I told it to, which is great. It means you can be a bit flexible with how you use it, but it's also a word of warning. If you want a good quality model, put a bit of energy into it, act up a bit. It's going to give you something. It also means that you can tailor it for your use case. If you're building something that's supposed to be a bit more fun and personable, you can go more fun and personable. If you need to be a bit more serious, you can do that, and it will loosely copy tonality, etc. that you've used there. I'm conscious I'm running out of time, but just very quickly recap some of the other features of the speech services. You can now deploy these into a variety of contexts for text-to-speech, for example, where you type and it will speak exactly as it is you. You can also use these for things like text-to-speech avatars, which fun. So here you can see we've got a virtual person. Let's choose, I don't know, Harry Casual. Lovely. And you can choose a variety of different languages and accents, and then a variety of different pre-trained models for those as well. You can give it some text here. We'll just click preview video. So never mind. I tried this earlier and it took about 2 seconds to generate, so that's a shame. But yeah, you can generate, humanoid-looking avatars even with your voice, which is fun, and a whole variety of things. You can, with the custom speech, no, with something else. These tools in here. With one of these tools, you can. There we go. You can actually create a lexicon file to say how words should be pronounced. So regardless of how you pronounce them in your training data or how the model thinks your word should be pronounced, you can actually tweak the pronunciation to make it say exactly as you. So in my case, I work with this platform called Umbraco. You can see here, if I put my on, depending on the lexicon of the model, it will pronounce.
Umbraco.
Oh, it can't find yeah, well, it should say Umbraco, not Umbraco. So you can tweak it based on files and stuff. So yeah, nice and powerful. Pretty cool. I like the new avatars as well. That's pretty sweet. Okay. So the big question: how much does this cost? It's not cheap. I'm sorry. It's $52 per compute hour for training. So my model took 1 hour and 4 minutes ish to train, 1.04 hours to train. So it cost me about $50 to train the model, which isn't the end of the world, especially if you're going to go and use this in production. If you're just playing around, that's quite expensive. If you're going to train pro, it's the same price. It takes 24 hours. You're looking at several $1,000s to train a pro model, and you need to get pre-approved use, etc. So it's out of the question for most cases unless you're going to use it in a proper professional setting. Where it gets really costly is once it's deployed. So a model needs to be deployed in order to be used. That means you need to deploy it to be able to apply it to your custom text-to-speech scenarios, etc. You can deploy and undeploy that model at any time. So you pay $4 an hour, and if it's just a case of putting the model up there, recording some of the phrases that you need, and then tearing it down again, you're only going to pay for that hour. But if you need it to be real-time, constantly there all the time, it's costing you $4 an hour. Several several $1,000s a month, unfortunately. You can use this absolutely anywhere. So Azure has their fantastic speech SDK, which is available for C#, Python, Java, etc., but also Objective-C, JavaScript, and the whole lot. So you can interact with this basically anywhere. Fantastic. And there's a REST API if there isn't an SDK available for your choice of language. You don't have to create a custom voice. There's over 400 voices available out of the box, from very, very corporate sounding American things to more localized and natural sounding, say Spanish voices, for example, whole heap of actions and of accents. And if you don't want to use one of these paid products, then there's a whole bunch of open source options as well. Things like Whisper, Deep Speech, and Mimic are great tools that you should go and check out. Fantastic. That's me. I can smell pizza, so I think I'm out of time. But of course, you can reach me on Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn as well, all at Callum B. Whyte. This was my whistle-stop tour of 2 or 3 of my favorite bits of the Azure AI product. Hope you enjoyed it. Happily have a chat afterwards, but thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Guang. Today I'm going to give you a little short demo into KQL. Hopefully the large majority of you know what it is, but I'm just going to reinforce the basics. So if you don't know, here's the place to get the talk. Some things about me, that is not me at work. That is just me dying from hay fever on the train to a charity walk. But I had to get a picture and I thought that was the most suitable one for this event. I've been in Azure for roughly 3 years. So I've joined KPMG and I've been on the grad program for that period. And I did some KQL for clients. The way I kind of found out about it was one of the clients on whim decided, hey, we want something built overnight. And then as the grad on the program, they're like, we don't have anyone to do it. You should do it. So that kind of event pushed me to this position to give you this presentation. This is my first time presenting in a user group. So go easy on me. I might make a couple mistakes. And kind of one thing about hobbies is I like to play horror games. Massive coward. I can't play a lot on my own, so I like to play in there. But I've slowly become kind of accustomed to the horror genre of games. And then the last comment is just like a clause. Everything I say is my personal opinion and isn't really reflective of the organization I work for. Right, so we'll get into it. So what is KQL? So KQL is an abbreviated form of the custom query language. And as you can expect, it's in the name, it's a query language. And basically what it allows you to do in Azure is to write really readable, really easy to understand queries, which pull data from kind of your log analytics, your data explorers, and other Microsoft services. So kind of this is just a different representation of it. And like I said, it's a very bespoke solution built by Microsoft for Azure. It requires very little experience to kind of get into. Like I said, its purpose is for it to be very accessible and readable. And it's very good at what it does in the sense that if I were to run, the initial line for just pulling all the metrics off a table, it won't take me hours. At most, it'll take me a couple seconds, if not minutes, depending on how large the data set is. So it's very time efficient. So you're not going to be sitting there for hours and trying to wait for an Excel spreadsheet to open. It supports a wide range of features. So you can filter information, you can aggregate information, you can sort out, by string, run mathematical formulas, and then there's the classic date and time kind of properties that you can attach to it to filter and present your information in the way that you find most digestible or for the purpose that you're trying to fulfill. Yeah, like I said, it's very tightly integrated with Azure since it is built for Azure. So Sentinel, Application Insights, and basically the whole Azure estate is running on KQL when you're trying to get metrics. So for instance, when you're running on workbooks and stuff, all the metrics it's pulling, although it's like visually represented, is running some form of custom language in the background. So this is not a stab at anyone who likes SQL. I'm not too well versed in either, but I'd say I'm more familiar with KQL because it's beginner friendly. But from what I hear, SQL has a few design issues. It's not as readable, not as beginner friendly, and there are some really annoying filtering clauses, and they could have just had 1 or 2. So some new users will look at it and go, why is it not select, or why is it not whatever quality prompt that I put in, right? And then they'll sit there, try and push it on like a Google prompt, and may or may not get the answer they want, right? But whereas in KQL, it's very, very straightforward. Like you have very limited options. It's like where, and then you just specify whether the string, the numerical value is contained, is not contained, is case sensitive, is not case sensitive. And we'll kind of get into that in the demo in a bit. But in terms of just getting started, to kind of really drive home the easy side of KQL, you just basically start with specifying the table of data that you're interested in. So for example, in this demo I'm going to do in a bit, I'm going to be concerned about the resources that are deployed in my current tenant, right? And then from there, it's just a matter of the only kind of hard inbuilt rule is that you have to start every single line with the pipe symbol. I know that it's not the most common operator to come across, and I spent 20 minutes of my time trying to find out where it was on my keyboard, because if you type pipe symbol in Google, they'll give you the conventional keyboard layout, which will allow you to click it from the shift with like one of the keypad settings next to the enter button, whereas my work laptop is hidden away. So that's the only minor kind of issue I have until this point. And from there, it's very much a logical process of, hey, here's my table, and how do I want to go through the information set? So the initial steps would be, you want to query a certain kind of set of information, right? There's a certain resource type, there's gonna be a certain type of, resource group, subscription ID, whatever it could be, and you filter initially by those metrics, right? And then from there, you have a certain set of information, but not all that information is relevant to you, right? You may not want a massive string for your resource ID, and instead you just want the resource name, because if you slap a resource ID in front of your client, most people are going to look at that and go, what is that, right? So you want to perhaps use the resource name instead, because it's more readable and more kind of understandable for the non-KQL user or non-Azure user. And then from there, you will select by projecting your kind of data of interest, and then you can summarize or order or kind of cleanse the information away that you find to be suitable for the purpose you're trying to fulfill. And this leads me to the demo. So if I just go and copy my pre-written KQL code, because I do not trust myself to write it live. Go there. Right. So as you can see on the screen, I've already ran the initial kind of line, which was resource. And what you can see is it took 1.5 seconds to pull 1,306 rows of data, which I think is pretty impressive. And I've seen it do up to 4 mil in around 30-ish seconds. So hats off to Microsoft for getting this sorted. I think so. The kind of next line of code I'm going to introduce to this is the where function. As you can see, where I've basically said where type is an absolute equals to, this is the type of resource I'm looking for. A lot of new users might fall under the trap where they'll have a type column separate, and it'll be named, for instance, virtual machine. And you'll be like, hey, that's the kind of the string I want to filter by, and you slap in and it doesn't work. So you have to be careful sometimes, right? So I'm just going to run this. Then it's going to give me all the virtual machines. Voila. So everything now in the table are virtual machines only. And from there, let's just say I want to know the count of virtual machines in each subscription. Oops. Yeah. So the count of each virtual machines in each subscription, and this gives me a relatively easy view of going, okay, this is kind of my total amount of virtual machines. And then within each subscription, it gives you a nice tabular breakdown of it, just for easy digestion. But let's just say, for instance, rather than by subscription ID, I want to summarize by the location, simply because I just want to know what regions my resources are deployed in. And like that, in less than a second, you have the same layout, but by region. And another great feature is I've got this information by region, and maybe I want to see it in a more visually appealing format. And you can do that by going to the pre-built. Okay, it's not generating, but on my screen it's generating. So there's a map in gray, imagine, and it basically plots where your resources are on the map. And before I got too deep into the demo, the great thing about kind of KQL as a feature is they already have a bunch of pre-generated kind of options for you on this side of the screen, as you can see. AI machine learning, for example, right? So all your metrics are there, and there are pre-designated prompts that you can select, so you don't have to waste your time building it from the ground up. And additionally, in the tables, it'll give you a full list of the tables that you can actually access on Azure and then query on those tables. If I move on. So I've summarized by location, but something to note when it comes to the cluster query language is a lot of your data that does come out will be presented with your kind of generic metrics where it's like the name of the resource, where it's deployed, its long ID, its resource ID, stuff like that. Most of that information isn't quite useful to the average kind of person trying to query, say, for instance, the creation date of their resource, right? So what tends to happen is a lot of this data is stored in the properties in JSON. And what you can do is you can extend that properties table into a separate extension of the table, and it would treat it as like an add-on to the table. Now, those kind of strings and that data can be queried separately. And this can be done as with the next line of code. Or if not, I've just, oh yeah. The reason for that is I have keyed out my subscription filter. Whoop. It's the pipe that's gone, that's why. Sorry, one moment. It should work. Oh, do I have an extra pipe? I see it, right, thank you so much. Yeah, so that's a little pain point as well. I'll get to later. Why is it not still working? Properties, JSON, ID name, time created. Right, 1 moment, please. Account subscription, that should work. Right. For some reason, that's not working. But if I were to kind of just verbally walk you through, essentially, the ideal outcome is, if I didn't screw this up, was it would extend the table, and then these two kind of properties I want to pull, such as the name, the subscription ID, and the creation date will be extended onto the table. And then this operator, before the time created, basically recategorizes the information as like a numerical value that can be queried for date and time. Once that's been done, I can, very simply filter, order the information I have descending to ascending, because like, let's say, for instance, rather than having sparsely populated resources, I want to see what the earliest and what is the latest. Followed by that, there is a slightly more complicated operator that you can pull where it says where creation date is greater, less than or equal to 30 days, and it can be days, minutes, seconds, depending on what you require. And this will give you another kind of reduced list of what you need from the data set. And finally, let's say, for instance, you're only concerned about the last 5, 10, 15, 100 creations, depending on how many kind of inputs there are of a data. You can just say take 15, and it'll take 15 of the top results, and it'll just present the information here. Yeah, so that kind of concludes the half-working demo. But if I go back to the slides. So another cool thing that I just forgot to mention was you can do the KQL queries, but a lot of people, let's say, they don't have the time to get familiar to go to like extended depth. What you can do is you can import the information into CSV, and those who are more familiar with, say, working with Excel spreadsheets, you can further kind of query and further filter down the information into a different presentation. So it's very much fit for all purpose. But like I said, because the custom query language is so good at querying large data sets at the beginning, it's kind of like the advised process to go through before you download 40 million and then open it in CSV and then query it again, right? It does save you a lot of time in the initial process. And as usual, how can you improve in KQL? Well, there's the good old practicing and getting used to it over time. You can Google what you want because there's lots of information on the internet. Unfortunately, there might be someone on Stack Overflow who's already created the query for you in advance, and you can copy and paste and hopefully it'll work. The other one is ChatGPT. It's great. However, you have to be really good with your prompts, as I found out the hard way. You can't just slap it in most of the time. There are a few kind of caveats, whether it be syntax errors or certain property variables, right? Or voila. Would you imagine? CoPilot, right around the corner. So Microsoft Fabric's released a preview feature for KQL queries. And the big kind of upside of this is when you query for KQL responses in kind of independent chatbots, they won't really understand the context of what you're trying to query. So you can, to the best of your ability, try and define that. However, they won't know what property tables you're looking at, what data set you're looking at the end of the day. But with the new CoPilot tool, it understands where you're coming from, what you want, right? And it will understand what parameters support as well, right? And this saves you a lot of time without having to kind of tweak and kind of edit things on the fly after you've got the query, and just kind of saves you a lot of time in the process. You know, like I said, long story short, it's better than KQL than me. It's probably better than you. So it'll help you kind of get to that end goal that you want to achieve in record time. There are, however, a few limitations with the preview feature, it being a preview feature. The more complicated the query gets, the more likely it is to pass an error and give you a bit of feedback that you don't really want to see. There's the limitation with having more than 10,000 concurrent users, which is a big number, so I don't think most organizations will struggle with that. And some desired kind of databases that aren't in KQL won't perform well when you perform the query on them. And then the kind of other CoPilot feature that Microsoft's rolling out is for security. So the big bonus for this one is, like with the previous one, with natural language, you can basically ask for a query that will help you perform the task you want at hand. So these can range from very simple security asks to more complicated and more granular things. And it's integrated with almost every single Microsoft feature, right? So the thing with KQL is the CoPilot feature will come along and people will use it, right? And I'm sure with most people who have some experience with, excuse me, CoPilot, you'll find out is it does the task, but only 80%, right? 80 to 60% roughly. And the best part is if you do understand the process from beginning to end and how KQL works as a function, you can save a lot of time within the gaps that, you know, say for CoPilot doesn't understand for KQL. And it's really beneficial because it'll just help you create more efficiencies in your workload, and you will waste less time in trying to fix errors and kind of marginal problems along the way, right? And then kind of this is my penultimate slide. There are some limitations with KQL, unfortunately. The biggest one being some parameters aren't conventionally named. So syntaxing is an issue as well. So there'll be random capitalization. So it'll be subscription, but the I will be capitalized before the D. And then you could write it and stare at it for 10 minutes and be like, why is it not working? It should be working. And it won't tell you because it's nice like that. So there's that minor issue. The pipe thing I mentioned earlier is quite frustrating. Finding that symbol and having to repeatedly do it is a minor issue, but I think it's better than writing select before every single line. A little jab at SQL there. And some tables don't necessarily have the information you need. So one of the examples I can provide for this is I did a Microsoft Defender for Cloud query recently, and your kind of assignments table, right, will present you data about the definition of the policy, but it won't give you information around where it's applied, when it was applied, and the state of its compliance, right? Whereas if you query the insights table, it will provide the information, but it'll be presented as metadata. So it's not very readable. It's very hard to digest as information. And what you can do is you can query two tables separately, individually, and you can join the tables. And what they'll do is they'll allow you to KQL will match the parameters to each table, and then will present like a final result with a combined table, which allows you to both see the definition of the policy you're applying, plus where it was deployed, when it was deployed, and whether or not it's compliant. So there are a few limitations in you're not going to find all your answers in one place, and it'll require a bit of elbow grease to get there in the end. But hopefully that's what the CoPilot stuff will sort us out for. And then if you're working on the browser, if you kind of go back and you don't save your query, it will wipe entirely, right? Fortunately, Microsoft has done something where I've only recently found out about this, where if you restart the tab or open the tab again, at the bottom, it'll say query 1 to 2 to 3, depending on how many you've opened, and it'll kind of save like an auto-save version of that. So it's a massive lifesaver, whereas before it was wiped, it's gone. That's like 6 hours of work just down the drain. And it's happened to the best of us. And it's not a general purpose language. Unfortunately, it is very bespoke and very custom made for Azure, hence why it works so well in Azure. So for those who are kind of trying to find a fit or solution for querying languages outside of Azure, SQL, I'd hate to say it, might probably be a better solution to kind of querying those data sets. And those who have kind of previous experience with other querying languages will find it slightly harder to get into the language. I mean, conventionally, the concepts are the same, but then, like I said, the language itself has minor kind of adjustments. And yeah, it also has limited integration with external systems because, like I said, it's very Azure native. But that kind of concludes my KQL 101. But yeah, feel free to ask me any questions if you have any around it. Can I do joins? Yes, you can do joins in KQL. So I'll give you an example right now. So this is the example I used earlier. So if I just show you the information, basically what you can see here is I pulled information from Policy Insights, right? Policy Insights, like I said earlier, provides you with a certain level of information around like the scope of your deployment, your compliance, and like date and etc. other information. And I've pulled that information, I've projected the kind of the columns that I'm concerned about, which are these properties, right? After extending the properties table, here is our join operator. And what this allows me to do is essentially pull the names of all the subscription IDs and then match it to the subscription display name. And this is important because, like I said earlier, for the use case I want to do for the client, the last thing I want to do is present them with a massive, whether that be like a pivot table or like a visual diagram where it goes subscription 6F5DS dash whatever has 16 non-compliant defender-related resources, right? That doesn't really project that message so well. So a join table in this circumstance will allow me to go instead subscription dev app 6, for example, has 6 compliant. So the sky is the ceiling. There's there's an infinite amount of possibilities you can do. A slightly more complicated one done by someone clearly more talented than I am has allowed him to pull from a kind of what's it called, an initiative, and he's been able to pull 2 or 3 separate tables together and kind of Frankenstein them together to get the ultimate end result. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Right, any other questions, or happy to end it here then, I suppose. Thanks for listening in.
You guys want to take 5 minutes? Then we go to Jonathan.
Everything about this is I'm going to be under the pretty stuff. Yeah, transfer. And your sense transfer probably get okay. Thinking we use it for a lot of tax. That does okay. There are some very difficult very today. Yeah, you definitely. Really goes for the leafing. That makes I mean, it's very I think that's fair. I wouldn't like my grade. So that's what it was doing.
Just put it on the screen, but change the displays to. You want to know, yeah.
That's fine. I can.
Just do that full slide, and then there should be a button there to.
Yeah, but then it shares my notes with How do you do extend on Mac?
I'm doing the talk. It was very interesting about the
You'll see, you never know what's a lot of the team.
very very lackluster. Everyone learn that can be a good stuff. Like the outside, they're talking about Xbox 360.
I think it's one of these buttons.
Yeah, if not, no matter. What I'll do is I'll just try and do it without my notes. That's fine.
It should be one of these buttons that swap it.
Yeah, but we need to do like extend instead of duplicate. But that's right.
Hello, hello.
Yeah. Let's go.
To start. Yeah. Hi everyone, and thank you for coming to listen to my session today on Azure Verified Modules. Can everyone see the screen? Sorry. Yep. Yeah. Perfect. Before we start, just a little bit about myself. So my name is Jonathan Deloyer. Most people call me JD. It's a bit of a mouthful, Jonathan Deloyer, so feel free to abbreviate that to JD. I'm a principal DevOps engineer, and I worked for an organisation called Adatis, but who were acquired by Telefonica Tech. And we've recently integrated, and we're now part of the wider Telefonica Tech group. And I've been working with the Azure BI stack for over 6 years now, specialising in modern data platforms in Azure. And started my career in the managed services arm of the business, where I maintained and built out modern data platforms. But in the more recent years, I've moved into an Azure DevOps role, specialising in infrastructure as code. Probably started the journey as most people do, hacking around with ARM templates, JSON files to try and get some sort of automation around your infrastructure. But in the more recent years, using more sophisticated tooling such as Terraform and Bicep. And then actually, once we have that infrastructure as code, how can we push that through a DevOps lifecycle, have governance, guardrails, and all that good stuff around our deployments. So leveraging technologies such as Azure DevOps pipelines and GitHub Actions for our CI/CD deployments. That's me. So for the agenda for today, we're going to start with an infrastructure as code overview, so just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and just set the scene a little bit for what's to come. We're going to talk about the challenges that modern teams have when it comes to implementing infrastructure as code across their business or different teams. And we'll talk about the solution to a lot of those problems. And we'll delve into what is AVM, why we should use Azure Verified Modules, Azure Verified Modules, and how we use it. So it's good to know why we should use things and how it works, but it's important to know, how we get started with that. And then, depending on if I've done enough sacrifices to the demo gods, we'll do a demo and I'll show you how you can implement Azure Verified Modules. Sound good? Sound good? Cool. So, just a bit of recap into infrastructure as code. What is infrastructure as code? Infrastructure as code is having configuration files, typically in the normal code files, to define and provision your infrastructure. Typically in the cloud, you can use it from on-prem, but for most scenarios, it's for cloud purposes. So what does that mean? So that means I can have a configuration file that defines exactly how I want my infrastructure to be configured in the cloud. So I can have a code configuration file to deploy an app service, for example, or I might want to deploy a key vault, or a virtual network, or a storage account. Obviously, it's not limited to these resources. These are just some of the resources that you can deploy through infrastructure as code. And I can define different properties, different configurations about these resources. I can define what security controls they have, what blob sort of components and properties that we might have on our storage, all different configurations available for our app service, etc. The sky's the limit. Whatever you can configure generally in the portal, you can define that as code and have that configuration stored in the form of code files. So why might we want to use infrastructure as code? So deployment speed. if we've got our pre-baked configuration files for all our infrastructure, it means we're not reinventing the wheel every time and we're having to click and say on this through the Azure portal. So it gives us that speed to roll out infrastructure within our environment. Reusable patterns, so we can develop reusable and recyclable infrastructure as code templates, which is very good when we're developing in multiple environments. So if we're making changes in development, for example, we can ensure that configurations that we apply in our code in dev can be translated and promoted to subsequent environments. And we can make sure that we're not making ourselves exposed to human error if we're doing the ClickOps approach to deploying our infrastructure. Repeatable patterns, so we can share infrastructure as code modules. I'll talk a little bit about the problems with this, but in an ideal world, we can develop and share infrastructure as code modules that can be consumed with other teams. So again, that we're not reinventing the wheel every time. Source control. So I can version my infrastructure as code templates. I can put them through repositories such as Git, for example, and I've got a full audit history of all the infrastructure as code changes that I've gone through. And it also means that other people can work on those templates, so people can collaborate and contribute to that infrastructure as well. And lastly, we can orchestrate our deployments through CI/CD pipelines. So we can implement guardrails, automated deployments, governance, all that good stuff around the deployment of our infrastructure. Sound good? Cool. What are the challenges? So that all sounds great, but in an ideal world, let's be realistic, none of this stuff really actually works first time, and there's always challenges when it comes to automation. So some of the challenges we have is that you'd find that different teams start developing their own standards across the business. So you might have Jeff in the data team, he might be deploying his services one way, and he's got a way that suits him. And you might have Danielle in the apps team who might be developing her app infrastructure in a different way. And then you start to feel that inconsistencies among different teams and the businesses, and then it becomes very difficult to maintain and manage. There's multiple repositories out there with different standards and ways of deploying. Sorry, bear with me, I'm not using my notes. So if you go out there and you search for bicep repositories, for example, there'll be loads of repositories where people have contributed and developed their own infrastructure as code standards. And you'll even find that people from Microsoft will have also contributed to those. And then you might think, well, actually, that's branded with an employee at Microsoft. That's got to be good. But that's not always the case, and largely it's not. Not aligned to best practice configuration. So you might be hacking around with an infrastructure as code template, and you might think, well, this is working, this is good enough. But you might not actually be deploying and configuring your infrastructure as code aligned to best practices or the well-architected framework. Modules are not maintained and kept up to date. So you might tend to find that your modules and the infrastructure as code templates become very stale, reliant on old API versions, and generally just not maintained. Whilst things are working, there's no real incentive for us to really keep on top of those sort of activities. So we tend to find that our modules are not maintained and become stale. We then start to get into problems about sort of different patterns, so things such as pattern module solutions, where we might want to deploy a virtual machine, but to deploy a virtual machine, we need to rely on a virtual network, a network interface card, and make a public IP address for any specific reasons. So how do we work around those solutions? So we start building out specific solutions for virtual machines, which incorporate all these services, or do we consume modules from all those different services into one place to create our virtual machine? So we've got different problems here that we need to overcome. So what's the solution to all of this? Well, Microsoft have recently come to market with Azure Verified Modules. And Microsoft's mission statement around this is to deliver comprehensive Azure Verified Modules library in multiple ISC languages, following the principles of the well-architected framework, serving as a trusted Microsoft source of truth. In short, this is the gold star, or North Star, I should say, for infrastructure as code modules. So why should we use Azure Verified Modules? Well, it's a single source of truth for all infrastructure as code. So forget all the other repositories that are out there. This is where you need to look if you want your gold-plated infrastructure as code modules. Accelerates the delivery of cloud-native applications in their supported infrastructure. So if you're consuming modules from Azure Verified Modules, a lot of that donkey work, a lot of that laborious work, Microsoft has already taken care of that for you, and you don't need to worry about all that fancy logic and different scenarios that you might need to account for. Composed of building blocks that encapsulate groups of resources dedicated to one task. So going back to that scenario where I said about a virtual machine, where you rely on multiple components, Microsoft know exactly what you need to deploy those resources. They might understand that actually you've got already an existing VNet and you might not need to deploy a new one. And all of that is baked into the Azure Verified Modules library to accommodate pretty much every single scenario you will need to encounter. It's aligned to the well-architected framework. So that means that resources are configured by default with the best practices. So where parameters are required or not always required for your resources, those decisions are aligned to the well-architected framework. They need to be careful with this point here because it's called the well-architected framework and not the cheap architected framework or the cost architected framework. So designing your infrastructure aligned to the well-architected framework is obviously best practice, but it comes at a cost because a lot of those resources are deployed with high availability, high redundancy, which comes at a cost. Okay, so this is what caught me out. So I thought I just want to point that out where I've migrated all of our services to Azure Verified Modules, and I got a message from someone saying, "Oh, our Azure bill is a bit higher than normal for our clients." And I said, "That's strange." And obviously, when I got the cost analyzer, I could pinpoint where those costs were coming from. And I could say, "Well, why is that deployed higher than usual?" And then we could pinpoint actually that by default, service plans are deployed with three instances rather than one, which obviously projected the costs significantly. So that's something to bear in mind. Up to date and supported. So these modules are constantly maintained, constantly updated, and supported. So if you have an issue, you can raise a GitHub request or a GitHub issue, a ticket, and someone will get on that and will action that. Version control. So the modules are updated and they're versionized as well. Okay, so you can pinpoint exactly which version of the module you would like to consume. I'll demonstrate that in the demo. Any questions so far? No? Cool. Let's get into the demo. Cool. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. Is that big enough, or would you like me to expand that? No? Cool. So I'm going to show the traditional way that we would write modules for our infrastructure as code templates, and then I'm going to show how Azure Verified Modules come into play. Okay. So traditionally, what we might have is we might have a directory called modules, and in here we might list out all the different services that we might want to deploy. So we might have a key bot, not key vault. You can see I put a typo in there. A storage account, a virtual network, whatever resource you might want to deploy, you might put it in like a subdirectory called modules, which will be reusable to consume. So if we can create our storage account module, we would define our resource like this, for example. Obviously, this is all offhand and off the cuff. Cool. Obviously, I'm going to keep this basic. And then I might want to consume that module like this. So I might go module st, and I can go to modules, and I can go storage account, I can go equals, and I can go required properties. Help me out here, CoPilot, so I don't have to type. Cool. Awesome. Cool. So I might write my template like this. Obviously, this is very basic, but this just is to give you an idea. And then if I wanted to deploy another storage account, for example, I would just duplicate that module and I would just inject different parameters that I need to make that specific. So this is good. This is great for me, sort of. How do I share this module? How do I make this accessible? to other people. This is really only really relevant to me. And as you can see, I've not really made this very reusable, to be honest with you. There's not a lot of configurations defined here. It's very basic. So where does Azure Verified Modules come into all of this? Well, now, as you can see, when I did my modules declaration here, and I said ST2, and I provided my path here, and I put modules to direct me to my file. Well, actually, you can see here that we've got a public registry there called BR, which is the bicep registry. And if I click on that, and I can go mcr.microsoft.com/bicep, you can see here, you've got a wealth of modules here that are all pointing to the Microsoft's public registry for their Azure verified modules. And I have to be honest, the bicep repository is a lot more hydrated, should I say, than the Terraform one, which is why I'm focusing on bicep for the purpose of this. But it's really good. And if I take that same approach, so I can search for storage, and there's one here for storage account. And as you can see, I've got the different versions there that are available to me. So I can go ahead and I can go to an earlier version if I wish, if there's something particular or if there's a bug within a newer version. And I can go to equals and I can go required properties. And that will tell me the required properties that are needed for that module. So for this module, the actually only required property is needed is the name of the storage account, because the way Microsoft have configured this storage account resources is that they've provided a lot of default parameter values for you. So if you don't provide them, it will default it to whatever's in the default. However, when it comes to developing your own modules, you'll tend to find that the properties, the IntelliSense is not always great when connecting to the provider. You're sort of having to guess, you're still having to flick back to the Microsoft documentation to work out what exactly the configuration properties are. But the beauty with using Azure Verified Modules, because you're consuming someone else's module, Microsoft modules, and they've declared parameters, you can see what those parameters are exactly, and you're not having to go and flick too much between the documentation for that. So if we go and we look at here, we can see these are all the properties that are available to configure for that resource. Now, you don't need to provide values for all of these, but this gives you the flexibility to configure that storage account exactly how you want. So for example, I can say allow blog public access tier, and I can say false, or I could say true. Okay, probably the default for that would be false. Okay, so there's a perfect example. If we get that again, I can decide whether I want that storage account public network access, for example, enabled. And which is what else is quite cool. I can decide if I want to deploy private endpoints to that resource as well. So I don't need to now start developing further modules, writing further configuration. If you're deploying a storage account and you want that private endpoint on that, Azure Verified Modules has got that logic baked in to easily apply that. And what's great as well is that you can provide RBAC instantly on those resources as well that you're deploying. So if I search for role assignments, I can then deploy role assignments straight to that as well. And I can go required properties, and I can see here that I need to provide a principal ID and I need to provide the role. So the principal ID is what I'm giving access to that storage account, and obviously the role definition ID or name is the role that identity gets. Pretty cool. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, so that was a storage account, for example, and I could do this exactly again with a key vault, for example. So if I do key vault and I go to the BR public and I can do key vault, and you can see we've got all the different versions of here, 0.6, 0.2, and I can go to required properties, and it will provide me the required properties. And then if I do control space, you can see all the different properties you can configure on that storage account, on that key vault, for example. So you can choose to enable soft delete. Now, a lot of these parameters, like I said, will have default values. Yeah, so these are designed against a well-architected framework. You can override those parameters
if you as you wish. So, for example, as I did on the customer that I was working for to help bring down those costs, I deviated from the module's default.
Show you what those default values are.
So I believe it should show you the allowed values. Let's take. It might not, unless they provided allowed values in the template, then it won't. But we can say, let's have a look. Yeah, so here you can say enabled or disabled because that's the allowed values block that they put in there.
But it won't tell you if the default's enabled.
No. So the good thing about this, though, just make sure I've covered off that, etc. Yeah. So these modules are not obscured from you. So if you want to see that code, by all means, you can go and see that. And it's really handy as well. So if you didn't want to consume from the public registry like this, you could easily fork the GitHub repository into your local environment, and you could consume it that way. I wouldn't recommend that by any means, but if you wanted to do that, that option's there for you to do that. So if we go to and if I type in Azure verified modules, see there's a site here, and there's a wealth of documentation onto this, which is really cool. Now, what's even cool is that not only can you consume from these modules, you can contribute to them as well, which means that, you know, I think it's pretty cool. I haven't actually done it myself yet, but being part of that journey and building that and contributing to the community, I think is really cool. So if we head into module indexes and we go into Bicep, for example, we can go to resource modules, and it will pull out here all the different resources that we saw in that list in the VS Code window. And if we go to virtual machine, for example, let's take that. It takes you straight to the GitHub page. And so if you want to have a snoop at the underlying code, you can by all means do that. And you can see here. Now, don't be put off by this code. It is very bloated. You probably aren't going to configure your infrastructure as code like this. But the reason it is developed like this is so that it can account for every type of scenario that someone wants to deploy. The whole idea about Azure Verified Modules is that everyone consumes from this and says, yes, I would like that property, no, I'd like that property, and so forth and so forth. As you can see, yeah, very bloated, very complicated, which is probably why I don't recommend you really forking this off into your own repository. And if we take the virtual machine, for example, there's all readmes as well on each of the modules. So if there's a property that you're not quite sure about how that should be structured exactly, I know most of the parameters are there, but where you've got sort of nested objects with your parameters, things can get a little bit tricky. AVM tells you exactly how those resources should be, that block should be configured. Any questions?
So we're pulling a module from a public source.
Yeah.
And we're specifying the version. Is there a way to have floating version?
Yeah, I've had that question before, and to my knowledge, I don't think you can. So you mean like if you're on version 1, you take 1.x and you can? Yeah. I don't believe you can at this point, but I will ask the question to the Microsoft team. Yeah.
It relies on people versioning their modules properly and not
correct
ruining things, but we'd hope Microsoft does it.
Yeah. exactly. And the process, so although I said you can contribute to Azure Verified Modules, it's not straightforward as you raise a PR, accept it, bang, off it goes. You have to get a sponsor within Microsoft or like a Microsoft employee nomination, because the danger is that if it's too much of a free-for-all, there's no accountability. People are going to just walk away from it, which is why they tie it to a Microsoft employee to do that. But all means it's possible. And I really highly recommend it. So I'm not here just talking about it. I've used this out in the field. It is great. Beware of the costs, but yeah. Cool. I think that was it. How do most people structure their infrastructure as code? Do you use this approach with having your modules locally and your... Yeah.
Depends who sets it up.
Do you find that you're resetting those, like, so let's say you've got this modules directory here. Do you find you're copying that multiple times across each repository or project you might be working on? Or
We use Git submodules.
yeah.
There's a way of shipping those around.
Okay.
Semi-version common things, but we often then find ourselves deviating from the common set of modules we've got, and then it's effectively a hard fork, and those files come into the repository we've got, and so we end up with lack of consistency when that happens, and it gets messy. So we try and have shared modules in a Git submodule. I guess we could deploy them on an endpoint somewhere as well, like an internal.
Well, what do you mean exactly, sir?
So like the Microsoft registry is public. We
Yeah.
put ours on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've not done it myself, but I don't see why. Yeah, why you wouldn't be able to do that. And the other beauty of it is where. Oh, sorry, did you
ask a question? To get access to like public people with the AVMs, is it like an extension you have to
No, you get it straight away. As long as you've got, I think, the bicep extension, you just get access to it straight away. Yeah, so there's no authentication, there's no barriers to entry around that. It's pretty straightforward. But what I found, which was pretty cool, where I work for a consultancy and we're working on multiple projects and we're going from client to client to client and we're copying these directories over all the time. Well, actually, we're doing away with that, and I can pretty much just lift and shift that one file from each customer's repository, and I've got the full suite of infrastructure as code, because all that donkey work, all that hard work is actually done over here. And why write your own modules when Microsoft have already done it for you?
Especially when it's Microsoft and not just some.
Yeah.
That's not public.
Yeah, exactly. And this isn't going away. This isn't some sort of pet project that they've developed. This isn't going away. This is going to be constantly evolved and enhanced as new resources come available, as new APIs in the resource manager are developed. Then this will be built out. I don't think there's any real date on it. So what you're saying, if a version gets redacted, how?
Yeah, just like, so like, how long is like, say that on the 0.6.2, how long is that kept? Is that kept forever, or did they retire it after a few years?
So as far as I'm aware, because it's still fairly new, I don't see them retiring old versions. However, if you do have an issue of an old version, the likely response is going to be move to the newer version, because it's probably got the bug fix in there.
So not been 2 years yet, but I expect when that comes around, they'll be deprecating versions that talk to all plugins. Then they're all backwards compatible. Get messed up.
Was there something similar like AWS?
Any AWS experts in the house? So I do believe there are repositories out there for AWS. Whether you can consume them in this manner, I'm not sure. I think there are CloudFormation sort of templates that AWS have developed. If it is sophisticated and is developed around this, I'm not sure. I've got to be honest, I don't know that much about AWS.
I guess the idea of Terraform in itself is that it's an abstraction on top of infrastructure, and you're not having to write specific scripts, which is what this is doing as well. So they're managing the sort of provider interop for you to an extent, but I'm also not aware of a repository of or even a community library.
Yeah. Do you come from AWS background?
Well, basically, we have the same projects in we are also doing something on AWS.
Okay. Yeah. Highly recommend, in case I didn't say it before. Cool. And that was largely it, really. I'm not going to keep talking and repeating myself about the same thing over and over again. It is pretty much what it says on the tin. So obviously we've had some questions, but if anyone has any questions, if not, there are my details if you wish to reach out to me. Perfect.
I've got 103 slides in this deck. What are you hiding from us?
If you want to be honest, it's just a bunch of Telefonica yeah, so perfect. I had to move everything to the new branding, so I said to marketing, I said, can you just come out of Teams? This. I said, can you send me the new deck? And I said, yeah, no, just pasted it into that. Cool. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Any more drinks? Then we do a quiz. 10-minute quiz. Yeah. Or we can do it now. Okay, no worries. We can just do a quiz. Okay, cool. Just for testing your knowledge, what you learned. Can you scan this QR code for me, please? Just want to see how many people's been paying attention. Don't worry, just multiple choice. That'll be easy. Yeah. Have anyone signed? Okay, cool. 6 players waiting for everyone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, we're missing 1. Okay, let's start. Wait, sorry. What's the purpose of Azure AI services? And it's timed. Yeah. Okay. So 6 answered second one, so that's correct. What's the main purpose of Azure Custom Neural Voice? Ten seconds. Okay. So it's who got that right? Okay. Oh. Okay. That's probably my bad. In my fault. Ignore that one. What benefit do Azure AI container offer? We didn't talk about container, but just test your knowledge in this one. 10 seconds. Okay, so it's the first one, allow you to run Azure AI service in your API in your own environment. So what role do bicep module play in the context of Azure Verify module? If you listen to Jonathan's session. Five seconds. So yeah, it's the fourth one. Standardized set by AVM. Wow. Oh yeah. I should have made the timer a little longer. What is the primary goal of Azure Verify module? No. Collection of trusted module for building cloud application. Yeah, just kind of right because it's trusted by Microsoft. So let me see the next one. Okay, who's in lead? Who's Nina? Ah, okay. So it's -1 point. Oh, no. Okay, so yeah, you're in the lead. So next one. What does AVM stand for? So if you pay attention, you you will know. Yep. So one person choose that one. Was it Callum? Yeah. Okay. So what is KQL primarily used for? Analyzing the images, querying structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. Yep. Yeah, so 5 people answered the second one, which is correct. Yep. So which KQL operator is used to filter rows based on the condition where summarize project distinct? The correct answer is where. Yep, so it's quite a lot. Everyone got that right. So what is the purpose of a summarize operator in KQL? Okay, the answer is the second. Yeah, so everyone got that right. So everyone's paying attention on this one, KQL one. So this is a bonus question. So what are necessary for transforming neutral language into SQL queries to produce spoken outputs with Azure AI services, Azure database, SQL database, and Azure's OpenAI semantic kernel and speech services? Okay, so the answer is second one. Yeah, so you need spoken one is Azure OpenAI and semantic kernel with speech service because you need spoken output, so that's speech. Yeah, both of them is one. Okay, so who's in the lead? So who won? Nina. Thank you. You get some stickers. Next time I give you the swag. Okay. So let me just do some. Okay, that's that. Yeah, so this is just feedback form. So how you can make the session better and stuff. How I can make the session better. Yeah, sorry, that's my fault. So it's fine. So yeah, so this is the end. So you can either stay for a few minutes, grab extra pizza, then go home, or see you next time. So thanks for coming, everyone.